Welcome to today's live webinar on capital programming, presented by a couple of Alithia's experts, David Past and Todd Brown. Please feel free to submit any questions in the Q&A chat throughout the presentation, and I will turn it over to David now to get us started.
Welcome to our webinar today. Thank you for coming. My name is David Paps. I'm a solution architect here at Alithia. When I first started out in my career, I was managing a technical team for a big retailer, and I remember the arduous process of having to ask for funding for my projects to go buy software, buy hardware, buy consulting services. And I just remember how hard it was to fill out the capital request, send that in, follow it through the process to get my my approval. And that always stuck with me through my career, and I'm really excited today to walk you through a solution that Todd and I have developed to create a modern capital lifecycle using the Oracle Cloud to solve that whole capital request process. Fun fact about me, during COVID, I wrote a book, The 9 Principles of Agile Planning, an overview of how to deploy sustainable budgeting and forecasting within your organizations. And I'm joined by Todd Brown. Todd, do you want to introduce yourself?
Perfect. Thank you, David. So I'm Todd Brown. Like David said, I've been working with David, I don't know, for the last 5-6 years on this particular product that we're showing today around capital programming planning. My background is I've been in the EPM space for coming up to 15 years now. And like David, prior to that, I was an accountant doing month end, and I've lived capital planning and budgeting in the real world. And so I was happy that I could take on this challenge and bring it into the Oracle EPM space and create a great solution. Go ahead, David. Sorry.
Our agenda for today's talk, we're going to give a quick introduction of the CPP capital programming solution and talk about how we can make capital programming as easy as 1, 2, 3. And then Todd's going to do a demo and walkthrough of how you can use the EPM cloud to do capital planning, and then we'll wrap up with a case study and any questions. Todd and I both work for a digital solutions and transformation consultancy called Alithia, which means trust in ancient Greek. We have over 4,000 employees that span the gamut from cloud migrations, managed services, modernizing applications, strategic consulting, and enterprise architecture. Todd and I both work for Alithia's Oracle practice, which is one of the largest and most premier Oracle consultancies in North America. We have 350 employees dedicated to Oracle business applications. So we focus on the 3 pillars of Oracle's back office solutions: ERP, things like GL, AP, AR, human capital management, and then where Todd and I really focus, which is the enterprise performance management solutions like planning and reporting. We have some of the best people in the space with 8 Oracle designated ACEs aligned to these different pillars of technology. And with that, what we're going to talk about is Alithia provides a proven no-cost accelerator that implements a modern life cycle. So we do not charge for this. We charge to set it up, but we actually have created a robust process that takes you from the ideation phase, where your different leaders in the organization can build up their own investment roadmap saying, hey, this is the equipment I need to purchase over the next year, the facilities we need to build or renovate, and then looking out 2, 3, 4, 5 years on the different refreshes and investments that they might need to make. So they can actually build up their, across IT, finance, facilities, real estate, all of your different leaders in the organization can build up their own investment roadmaps within this accelerator. And when they're ready to actually go ask for the money, they can submit a capital request through an online form and workflow. Those capital requests can be brought to different levels within your different capital committees, up through your board of directors, however your sort of capital flow is within the organization. Set your capital budget, draw down and deploy those capital budgets throughout the year, integrating with your capital or with your procure to pay system. So as a project gets authorized, actually setting those capital projects up so that people can draw them down and execute their projects and run that project all the way until you put those assets into service. So we've really perfected, going from idea to capital asset with our accelerator. And we like to say capital programming is easy as 1, 2, 3. And it's really 3 use cases that we've implemented with the solution. So it's very much online, cloud-based capital request forms and workflows. So that's having everyone within the organization that needs to ask for money to fund a capital initiative to actually come in, fill out the justification, the business case, what types of capital and expenses are we going to need for this investment, as well as capture the other side of it, which is the ROI. So what are the benefits of making this investment? Are we going to see an uptick in sales? Are we going to affect our gross margins by making this investment? Is there an SG&A impact for making this investment? Being able to build that whole business case within an online, easy to use cloud system. The second use case we've solved with the accelerator is really that 24/7, 365 process that when a project might have been budgeted 24 months ago, but now when the leader is actually ready to start the process and start procurement for that investment, being able to take one of your previously approved requests and actually say, hey, I'm ready to start now. Can I have the project set up in the procurement tool, and actually doing a follow-on request and review to authorize that project to start. So we solve for that. And then the third piece of it is really that 360 monitoring of your whole in-flight capital program. So, we like to say it's, deploying a solution like this is a little bit like changing the wheel on your car while you're driving down the highway. I'm sure you have a set of capital projects that are already in flight, plus all the new things that people want to do in the future. So we do have we have a process to convert in your existing capital program, as well as integrate with your procure to pay system. So you get that 360 view of what's been budgeted, where are you from a purchase order commitment perspective, what's been spent from an expense perspective, and what do you have left to go on your different projects, and be able to look at that from one pane of glass. Oracle and Alithya, we've partnered to create this accelerator. It uses standard out-of-the-box functionality provided by the Oracle Cloud. Alithya's capital portfolio planning is the business content. So we provide the request forms, the ability to prioritize capital requests, capture the approvals around your different capital investments, being able to set your budgets for different areas of the organization, usually things like IT, real estate, facilities, and so on, and being able to draw those capital budgets down. As we talked about, the ongoing monitoring of the capital program, and really some of the killer functionality is really that concept of allowing all of the different leaders in the organization to build up their investment roadmaps within a cloud-based tool, both so that people aren't running spreadsheets for their different parts of their business. Everyone doing their own thing, you get it into one tool, but also if everyone can start to build up, hey, these are the things I might want to do over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Now we have this repository of information that the organization can go and mine and say, hey, it looks like we could do some things faster. We're going to have to raise funds to fund all of these different projects, or really sort of look at the, what's coming down the road from a CapEx perspective more strategically. So Alithya provides the business content, and Oracle provides the cloud-based planning technology. So Oracle Cloud EPM is the leading cloud planning system, and where this really we get a lot of value from a capital programming perspective is being it's cloud deployed. It's easy to deploy across many sites into your different locations. So if you have a lot of facilities or sites where there might be leaders that need to manage a capital investment roadmap and ask for funds, it's very easy to stand the solution up and deploy it to those sites so people can access it on their laptops or on tablets or phones. It requires very minimal training to use it. As Todd will show you when we do our walkthrough, very easy to log in, enter your capital requests, and ask for your funds and see where your requests are in the workflow. And then for your finance power users, still you get the full suite of being able to interact with Microsoft Excel, PowerPoint, and the other Microsoft tools while working within the planning solution. Oracle Cloud EPM Planning is a cloud-based planning, budgeting, and forecasting solution. Oracle, it's configurable planning best practices for all lines of business. So today we're really talking about CapEx. But if you're looking, CapEx is one use case that can span finance, ops, construction, real estate, treasury, and so on. But it has scalability to support other budgeting and forecasting processes beyond capital programming. And it is ranked as the leader by Gartner and IDC MarketScape for cloud-based planning tools. The accelerator, which Todd's going to show you in a second, is available in the Oracle Cloud Marketplace. So you can either Google for it or scan this QR code, and it will bring you to the listing within the Oracle Cloud Marketplace. With that, Todd, can you show us how we can make capital programming as easy as 1, 2, 3?
Absolutely. Thank you, David. So I'm just going to log into our, well, I'm actually already logged into our demo application. So again, it's sitting on top of the Oracle EPM framework. So if you already have, say, like a financials module or maybe a workforce, the capital planning can slide right in with those applications, or we can create a separate instance. So like David said, like, you know, we're coming into this, we're coming in with CPP, and we have, sorry, just wait a second. We have predefined forms and reports that come as a solution, and when we do project clients, we really make it there. We configure it for their needs. As you can see, there's some icons here. So submitting a project, that's a process when you're really submitting projects as a part of the budget setting process, typically 6 to 8 months before you actually, you know, start funding or start executing on those projects. We have a separate routine for funding those projects, right? So seeking funds from those planned projects. Then we have monitoring projects. So that's really monitoring all your active projects. Again, integrating with your GL and your procure to pay system to basically bring in the spend and commits on those projects. Approvals is workflow. So we have workflow. We've workflow enabled on here. We've configured it in a different way, more as a project-based approval rather than let's say like a cost center or entity-based approval. And then we have this concept of checkbooks, which I'll get into. So the first thing I'll do is go into the submit projects. So this is we call it the sandbox. This is really an area for your departments or your locations to start building up their capital investment plan, their wish list. What do they want to do with inside the organization? And what they can do is just right click on here and go, okay, I'm going to create a budget request. I want a project to be planned for next year. They can select what cost center that this is going to be posted to. All these are Canadian locations because I do live in Canada. We can then also select what property type. So what we can do, like most organizations, you know, IT projects, you know, you probably have forms that look different for an IT project versus say like a new location or a new build out or like a renovation project. So we do support different project types and capturing different information based on that. You enter a project name, you enter a start date, you enter an in-service date. Then we can also like start tagging the projects. Oh, this is a growth project. This is a productivity project. This is a maintenance project, or maybe in this particular example, I have fleet down here too. So we can actually break down or start tagging these projects saying, hey, I just want to evaluate all the growth projects, or I want to evaluate all the productivity projects. So we can start tagging them with attributes as well as these projects are being created. So I'm not going to save this one. I'm going to go to an existing one that I have. But if I went through, it would add it to the fields here. So once it's added in the listing here, you have a request. You see it's in progress. We're doing live validation saying, okay, this is not complete or not completed enough in order to submit it into workflow or to even to be considered. And I can tell that because there's no dollars in here. I haven't entered any dollars. So through a right-click menu, we can actually go to the forms that are behind there. So the forms are really all those forms that you're probably currently doing now, right? Those forms that you're filling out. Maybe you're using a Smartsheet tool or some other way of completing these forms. But this is where you're entering like the project description, any justification, date, and yeah, you're entering dates. Maybe, you know, IT is requesting it, but it's going to go in service in another location. So we do support, you know, a requesting part of the organization and an in-service part of the organization. Down here is reporting. So these are some of those like attributes or tags that you can do. So you can tag the project with different attributes if you want to report on them later. This is cross-functional review. So as the project is going through workflow, we could tag it saying, hey, IT really needs to see this project. We're renovating a new location, and we're going to need some IT infrastructure. So I'm going to tag this so that IT has to review this project as it's going through workflow. These are our dates. So the project start date, which we would have entered when we created it, maybe an inventory date, or the date that it needs to go in service in your capital asset module in your GL, and then a depreciation start date if it's different than the inventory date. Financial metrics aren't calculated yet because, again, we don't have any financials actually on this particular request. So users can kind of fit out that, the not really the number side, but really the textual questions, the text-based stuff, the justifications, all that sort of stuff. So we configure this for you when we do a project. Then we have several other forms. We have the project expenditure form. So we support both, capital asset categories. So, users would automatically just enter what they want to spend. We also support like operating expense. So maybe you need to assign like, a PM to this project in order for it to go live. So we do support capturing operating expenditures as well as capital expenditures when it's associated with a project. Some IT projects have SaaS involved with it, so those are more like prepaid expenditures. We do support that as well. So now we have some project costs. So this is really the cash outflows of the organization. Then what we can do is that we can also be capturing the operating impact, right? So I've entered in the project expenditure. As you can see, this is sort of like a mini P&L for this project. So I see that now I'm carrying some depreciation based on the assets. But now, as this is going through workflow, I could put some saying, hey, if we do this project, it's going to increase our revenue over the next 4 years. So now I can start calculating stuff like payback years, ROI calculations, IRR calculations. So now I can actually start evaluating this project as it's going to, create our return on investment within inside the organization. So again, this is like a little mini P&L on the project. So now that some of the financial metrics are being calculated, the last one I'm going to show you. So we do support attachments. So if there's site photos or plans or vendor estimates or maybe a PowerPoint presentation done, so we do support the ability to attach files on here. Things that we can't capture here or other assets that are created. Not assets, but other documents that are created, we can attach them here. And this is using all Oracle native functionality where you can attach files. Now, since we've entered in all that information, we do, use Oracle's management reporting tool. And what we can do is we can combine all of that information. So everything that was entered in on the property screen, everything that was entered on that project expenditure screen, and then that mini P&L, seeing the impacts. We can calculate some of those metrics. So when you're evaluating these projects, and then obviously we can graph any of the data. So the red is really the cash outflows for the project, and the blue is really the operational impact. What sort of net income is this bringing to the organization? This could be run in PDF, HTML, or brought into Excel. And it can be emailed out. So that's how you sort of complete a project. And so again, CBP is replacing a lot of those manual processes that are done offline or emailing to get approvals and things like that. So we're capturing now all that data in here. Once we're done with completing all those forms, we can then submit it into workflow. So it's just as easy as just going promote. Now it's going to go out of my world. It's going to go out of my sandbox, and then it's going to go into workflow. So, emails are going to be generated so people can start approving these. So it's gone out of my view here, but as it's in workflow, as a user, I can still track it through workflow. So I can see the one that I just promoted, and I can see it moving through all of the workflow steps until it gets approved. I can still access all of the same forms. So I can go take a look at what I submitted. I can still run that report if I wanted to run that report. So I never lose track of all the projects that I've submitted, and I can see them gaining approvals throughout the system. I can also see who's approved it as it's moving through the system. So we do keep track of who created it, the date that they created it, when they promoted it. So we are tracking all of that live on all the projects. So that's really on the sort of sandbox concept and the filling out the forms, or sometimes we refer to them as pro formas, filling out all the forms on a project. Now we've built in a workflow process. So inside the workflow process, there's these stages, basically, the first level. So this could be like your director level, maybe operational VP. It really depends on the organization. And we can see that project is here. An email has automatically been sent out. There was a link in the email saying, hey, this person has requested this project. Can you go in and review it, right? So I'll have like the amount and things like that. So once it's here, I can see, oh, okay, so it's in progress, but IT hasn't reviewed it. So again, I flagged that project to have an IT review as it's going through workflow. So the IT person would have also received an email, and they've also would have received a link that would have taken them to a view that's only looking at the IT projects that need a cross-functional review. So IT can come in here, they can see that project, they can access again any of the forms that we had completed. Once they're done the review, they basically say, okay, I'm done, I've reviewed it. Once that's done, then that director, operational VP can see, okay, so it's ready to promote now. All the cross-functional reviews have been done. That director or VP, again, can access any of the forms that were completed on this, and they could either promote it, or they could approve it if it's below the threshold that they have for approval, or they can reject it back to the user, and then an email will be sent back to the user. So we have basically a highly configurable workflow. So in this particular application, we have 5 steps of workflow. Some clients only require 3 or 4, and we'd configure that for you. Now, so we have all these steps. We can do emailing at all these steps. We can do distribution lists. We can do email multiple people, and again, we configure that for you once we get into the actual project. So once the project has been approved, well, actually, I'll just go back a sec. So the submit project, again, that's more around the budget setting process, 6 to 8 months before the actual fiscal year. Then during the year, you would be funding those projects. So any of the approved projects that were submitted during the budget setting process, then you'd be able to fund those projects. So again, it's a different sandbox, but just for the projects that you're trying to fund. You can see all of the budgeted projects that were approved. You can convert them and basically copy the data over and then submit it into workflow again. So the important thing that I'm driving home here is that we've broken the process from budgeting and funding. So just because you budgeted the capital dollars doesn't automatically mean that you get the capital dollars, right? Because now when we're in the fiscal year, prices could have changed, the business conditions could have changed. So, we don't necessarily fund all the projects that were planned. So that's why we have 2 processes, but again, we carry the data over if you're just funding a project that was planned. So similar sandbox concept, a similar process to go into workflow. So the next piece is that once you've funded your capital project, then at that point we assign a project number to those requests, and then we start integrating with your procure to pay system and your ERP, either most likely the accounts payable module, or if you have project accounting enabled, we can integrate directly with that. So the projects are listed down the side here, and we have the entities here. Now, this is a view really for your capital manager or potentially your project managers. So if your project managers were in here, they could actually start providing information to the manager saying, oh, this project actually is more in red now. The schedule, the schedule's kind of going into yellow as well. So they can sort of provide status updates across all the projects at a really, really high level, right? So those project managers are using their project execution tools, to execute all the tasks on a project. But this is a tool so that they can give information to people who are managing the overall capital budget. Okay. As you can see here, we're keeping track of all the different scenarios. So we can see this was budgeted for $250,000, but due to supply chain, the costs were higher when we actually went to go fund it. We funded it for $275,000. So we funded it for more than what we've budgeted for. Again, this is the project spend, so we're integrating with your accounts payable subledger or your project accounting module, and so we're bringing in the spend data. How much money have we spent on this? Simple calculation: what was budgeted versus spend. So we still have $203,000 of unspent budget on this project. Then we integrate with your procure to pay system. How much is outstanding on open POs right now? So I can get a sense of like what's uncommitted on this project. So we can calculate that very simply. Okay, so 18,000 is open on all open POs right now. So we have 185,000 of uncommitted funds on this project. So these are all like data integrations and calculations. Then we get into like the ETC and EAC concept. So this again, the project managers can come in and say, you know what, I know that we have 185,000 of uncommitted funds. We're committed to 18,000, but this project is, it's going to take us, $250,000 to actually bring this project to a close, right? So these should be concepts that are in their project execution tools, or they should be calculating it. Then what we do is we calculate the EAC, is saying, well, if you're saying it's $250,000 to finish the project, that means that you're going to be at the end of the project at $322,000. That's a lot more than what we funded it for at $275,000. So we flagged it basically in orange to bring attention to those projects that are possibly going to go over. They haven't went over yet, but possibly go over. So we support another process where it's like, okay, you need to go for more funding on this project so we can create a funding change to supplement this budget. So we create a funding change. It creates a request in a similar sandbox over here. You submit that into workflow, and then those additional funds get approved and they get added onto these projects. Okay, so we do support adding the funds on there. Some of those attributes that we were talking about, again, we can filter these where it's like, oh, I only want to see like the growth well, these are all growth projects. I only want to see the compliance projects. It'll automatically filter. So you could pull out, you could say, oh, I only want to see the projects that were tagged with a certain filter, or I only want to see a certain project manager's project. So we support tagging and reporting in that fashion. Every project has like a mini financial statement. So if I look at this particular project, I'm pivoting those scenarios that were on the columns down to the rows. So again, I can see how much it was budgeted by period, how much it's been funded by period. Then what we can start doing is that some of the project managers can go, well, we're having problems and we need to move some money from Q4 to Q1 of next year. So we can support that where we basically input timing differences. And then with that, we basically reforecast out the project. So we maintain how much it was funded for, how much it was budgeted for, and then you can basically reforecast the budget. Here's our spend data coming in right here for the first 2 quarters, and here's our commits data coming in right here. So just pivoting the columns that you saw in the other form down to the rows to get a complete view by period, by year on the projects. Okay, we also support the same thing that you saw on the request side, like a pro forma or like a PDF ready report. So if you want, like, we can then gather up all the information on the project, and these graphs are more looking at like, okay, how much was it budgeted? What have we spent? What's the new projection? What's the ETC, EAC? So we're kind of looking at the project in a different way, not from an ideation phase or a prioritization kind of ROI, like should we do this project or not, but more like these are just like a snapshot of the health of a project, like what's the project about and what's the health of it. So we do have that reporting capability. We do support like project closures, cancel and carry forward. So if a project is complete, you can close it. And what it does is it takes any remaining dollars on the project and puts it back into the capital budget so it can then be allocated to other projects. Closure is the same thing as cancel, but it's just like a different status flag, right? So close means that a project went to the end. Cancel really means the project started and it's no longer going forward. We do support carry forward. So, if they didn't spend all their project dollars in 1 year and it's just because we couldn't get stuff delivered on time, we can carry forward any unspent dollars from 1 year into the next year. I'll show you some of the reporting off project before I get to the overall capital budget screens. So we have all of Oracle's EPMs like reporting features. So we're using management reports here. So dashboarding, And all these reports can be in Excel. They can be in data can be also be pulled into the whole Microsoft Office suite, so PowerPoint and Word and things like that. So this particular report is just kind of looking at all of the active projects. We can filter by year, so I only want to see the amounts for FY25. I can see it for the entire organization or just a part of the organization. So this is just kind of telling me, saying, okay, for FY25, we've allocated $200,000 on projects. We've spent $72,000 or 36% of the budget. 103,000 is unspent. We have 18,000 of commitments. If I add commitments to spent, we basically are spent and committed 45%, and we have 85,000 of uncommitted dollars on the projects for FY25. We can look at it by category. So this is a little different, but like that, those growth, productivity, maintenance, so we can see how we're spending across the organization. And then we can take a look at the performance of all the projects. What was budgeted? How much has been spent? What's the new projection for the project, or what's like the estimate at completion? So we can do all of that as well. Another type of report that we bring into projects is like a top 25 report. So here's where we can see basically, all the projects that are going on. Similar information on the other dashboard, but just more with the scenarios across the columns and more kind of data driven. And reporting has drill through capabilities, so you can drill through and see, okay, I want to see all the details on this project. So again, getting to that project pro forma report. So a lot of reporting capabilities in Oracle EPM, and we're bringing that with the solution. So the last thing I'd like to touch on is really the capital budget, and that's here. Sometimes we refer to this as the checkbook, right? So this is a clearinghouse for all of the dollars. So when we were talking about the submit project, that's really like, what was the plan? What are all the projects that we were planning to do? And that's like covered here in basically the budget request. These are all the projects that we're planning to do. We've categorized them by like growth, productivity, maintenance. So these are our planned projects. I can see all the details here. These were all the projects that were put into the budget, and I can see them all here. The next line is like, okay, so that's my pool of money I can spend next year on capital projects. The next line is like, how much has been funded out of that pool? Like, how many projects have actually started and have been funded? So $200,000 has been funded out of those pools of dollar. And I can see all of the projects that I've actually funded. So I've funded these 2 projects out of those pool of dollars, right? So again, we're keeping track of how much was planned, and then have a separate process for the actual funding or the drawing down of those funds. Here we're supporting transfers. So if, again, business conditions change, we could transfer money between these types of categories. And then down here, we have that close and cancel concept, where if you close a project that still has money, it can release those funds back to the capital budget or the checkbooks, and then it can be reallocated on a new project. So we're keeping track. The checkbooks are keeping track of all of the money inside the organization. And then we've developed some reporting at that overall capital checkbook level, where we say, okay, this is how much you actually budgeted or planned for. This is how much you allocated on projects. Closed or canceled, any funds released back to the checkbook from closures and cancels. And this is basically the unallocated capital budget. How much money that we had planned for hasn't been allocated to projects yet. And then here we're just showing spend. This is really spend on the projects that have started. And again, we have all the reporting capabilities. We could see, basically the budget versus like projects started by region. So you can see, oh, Toronto, like, you've planned a lot of projects, but you literally haven't started any. Well, what's going on there? So we have all the reporting capabilities here. And again, all the, the filtering capabilities that comes out of the box with Oracle. So that's the checkbook concept. I think I went a little faster than planned, but that's basically what we have here. So again, submitting projects is a buildup of all the projects you want to do as a part of the budget. Funding is when you're in the actual fiscal year and you want to fund projects. Monitoring projects is when you actually have the funding out there and we start integrating with your procure-to-pay system and your AP subledger. Again, we can also integrate and send these dollar amounts into your procure-to-pay system to enable, and if you have spending control enabled, we could then say, hey, you can set it for 275 and they can't issue POs for more than that. We can definitely integrate with that. ETC, EAC, if you have tools on the project execution side, we can definitely integrate that and directly load these numbers directly in there from all those other tools that are used in different parts of the business. And then beyond projects, oh yeah, we have everything is workflow enabled. So, whether it's a budget request or a funding request or a change on a project, we support workflow, so we can email, capture approvals all within inside the system. So we're not, attaching stuff to emails and getting approvals through email. It's all captured within inside the database. And then the last piece here is really that overall capital budget. How do we do on plan? How much have we actually funded or sent out the door? So again, we're keeping track of all that in this checkbook concept or this capital budget. That's all I have to show. So I guess with that, I can hand it back over to you, David.
Thank you, Todd. That was awesome. Todd and I thought we would just wrap up with a quick case study of one of our clients that deployed this. I think it was during the second half of COVID, the rapidly growing retail chain that had a $150 million capital program with about 400 locations. And they were trying to manage what new physical sites to build out, what sites to remodel. So in a retail, you always want to keep your sites fresh, as well as some IT spend that they wanted to manage, as well as distribution, warehouses, and delivery fleet. So they had a number of different styles of CapEx that they were managing. It was a Microsoft Word-based request form. So when someone wanted to go buy something, they had to fill out a request form. They'd email that to someone in finance, and there really was a person in finance that would cobble all of the requests that came in every month, put them on a spreadsheet, bring that to their different capital committees to gain the approvals, and really it was focused around someone that had to adjudicate the process, and ultimately it led to internal customers being frustrated. You never knew where your money was. It was hard for the organization to keep track of what projects hadn't started yet, who was over budget, and just trying to keep a pulse on the $150 million to spend, as well as, hey, what are we going to do next year? So internal customers were frustrated, finance was frustrated, it's just hard to manage, and then the organization as a whole, it was difficult to know where they stood. Could we redeploy capital? Could we move, fund a different project? Or do we have projects going under budget, over budget? So they did adopt the capital portfolio planning accelerator that Todd walked you through, and that was their foray into the Oracle Enterprise Performance Management Cloud. What was interesting there is they actually used SAP's procure-to-pay system. So really, as Todd was showing, one of the real benefits here is building that bridge with your procurement tool. So in this organization, it was an SAP procurement tool, and so we would get every day we would get an update of what the open PO balance and the invoices that had been charged against each capital project, and we were able to send back to SAP, hey, this is the budget for each project. And ultimately, all capital budgets were managed in one tool, in one place, and they had the 360 view of all of their different capital projects, and everyone could knew where to go, to ask for money, but to see where they stood on their capital projects, and gave finance the ability to dynamically move capital budgets around. So if they had to move funds from one part of the organization to another as business conditions change, they're able to do that. And then using the power of the Oracle EPM Cloud, the briefing packages, the PowerPoints that they would bring to different committees during their different review cycles, they could actually generate those PowerPoints automatically, so that those reports that Todd was showing during the demo, we can actually assemble the briefing packages to say, hey, here are all the requests that are pending review this month. You can actually print that out and bring that to the different committees and allow people to review them. And then ultimately, you're able to capture the approvals right within the tool. And so this chain was able to do it. This project was about 3 to 4 months from the very first meeting to the time they were able to capture requests in the tool. With that, I want to thank you for joining Todd and myself today. If you'd like to learn more, we actually have a learning kit available that has blogs, videos, other webinars Todd and I have done. So certainly can take a look there. And with that, I want to say thank you and hand it back to Mary.
Great. Thanks, David. This wraps up today's webinar. Thank you all again for attending, and please check out our website at alithia.com to stay up to date on our other upcoming webinars, insights, events, and more.